I'm John Graham, and this is our new DVD, Catching Coyotes, Plain and Simple. This is not a DVD of how to boil traps or adjust traps or pick the very basic locations and how to pick lures and stuff. There's lots of good stuff on the market today that go into those type of things. What this DVD is 31 years of my life kind of wrapped up into this video. I've chased coyotes my entire adult life. Over half I've been employed to be a coyote predator control trapper. I'm also a fur trapper, and what this DVD is going into is more of the finer points of stuff, looking over my shoulder as I make sets, remake sets, pick locations, and just day-to-day stuff on a real working trap line. No stage footage on this DVD at all, just like the rest of our videos are all actual trap line footage and shots taking while on a working trap line. And this one is the same thing. Everything here is what we do and how we do it. I didn't go home and call the camera guy and have him come out and take videos of the animal trap. He rode along with me and saw things as I do it every day. There's not a lot of fluff, there's not a lot of gimmicks. Stuff like that is really basically not worthwhile in a real trap line, in my opinion. But everything I'm showing you here today, if you pay attention and think a little bit about it and can adapt to it and adapt it to your trap line, I'm sure you will find the information very valuable when chasing coyotes. And what I'm going to show you here is a culmination of what I've come up to be with the very best possible method to hang snares, especially trail snares. So pay attention to what I'm going to show you here. A lot of you guys already know this if you watch my other videos. Some of you haven't, but from what I've learned by talking to people and some of the problems they've had with hip catches and leg catches and different things, I'm going to show you how to avoid those the highest percentage of time that you can and make your snaring the most effective. That's the objective of this video. It isn't for me to sell it to you for $39.95. It's for you to learn how to snare animals. Coyotes, bobcats, whatever. Fox, whatever you want to snare after watching this video, you should be able to. Now, for you to be able to see the position of the snare and what I'm doing here, I just went ahead and used a brand new snare with shiny cable still, just because I've learned over the years making videos and some of the footage we shot previously, you can't see what I'm doing at all times. So we waited for the right light and also used a snare that's just basically raw cable. So you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing, and we're going to try to go slow so you can see all the finer points. Now this particular snare is 5/64 7x7. It is still what I consider to be the best all-around coyote snare cable made and used. I got to be honest with you, I've had people, friends of mine and peers of mine and customers of mine that have gone to different kinds of cables and tried 16th inch 1x19 with different locks. And it's pretty much like clockwork, the ones that come back to using these Ambergs with the 5/64 7x7. But when I'm making these videos, I try not to make it a sales pitch. I'm just throwing it out there what I use and what I consider to be the best for various reasons. It does take paint good. It is a little bit, I will say, pliable, which is kind of an important factor. But it also holds a nice shaped loop, and it does close fast, just like lightning. One of the main reasons I prefer this 5/64 7x7 for coyotes over 1x19 16th, which is so popular with a lot of people now, is that when the 1x19 gets knocked down in the wind or by an animal brushing against it like a deer, they fall down with about a 1/3 to 2/3 size loop, just because of the configuration, the stiffness of the cable. And you get a lot of hip catches that way, a lot of leg catches, a lot more chewed out, a lot more knockdown snares. And just over the years, and what I've tried and come back to, and what I've tested and retested, I've come back to this 5/64 7x7 to be the best versatile, all-around snare cable to be used for coyotes that I've ever seen. I have no doubt that with the use of good locks like the Amberg, with the compression spring, the dispatch spring, I have no doubt that it's added to the versatility and the effectiveness of it too. This is a very deadly combination for coyotes, cats, fox, coon. Being at the end of the cable, this release ferrule makes a nice streamlined, compact system. Very, very effective, but it doesn't hang down below the lock like some of the J hooks and S hooks I've seen. I'm really a sole believer on these Amberg release ferrules, and I've had very, very little trouble with them. When you think about the percentage I've had with a deer held occasionally that I've had to release versus how many thousands of snares I've had out. So I really urge to try these release ferrules as a complete system where the power goes out the bottom of the cable, but the animal going into it and a non-target can break it away because it's pulling off the end of the cable rather than manipulating the bottom of a cam lock or whatever, where it has to pull enough to pull something apart from the bottom. If it goes off the end of the cable, it just makes more sense. It's going to be more effective and more reliable. Okay, how we anchor and where we anchor is very important on if the snaring is going to be effective for you or not, if you're going to have the high amount of dispatches we want, if you're going to have the high percentage of releases of non-targets, which we expect. And I'm a big believer and a big proponent of using lots of cable. This particular snare is an 8-foot snare, but in the process of making a coyote size loop, we're going to use around 40 inches of cable, so that leaves only about what? 4 foot of cable left to tie off. So I've gone to more and more 3/32, 7x7 extensions with loops on both ends, and with these extensions I got around 14 to 16 foot of cable, and this is enough to go over to a tree like we're going to use to the side of this trail. And it also lets an animal, like let's say we have a non-target, that'll also allow that animal to exert enough force to make the release system work. I think it's very important to save snaring and to keep snaring alive in states is to release these non-targets, but also at the same time with more cable, like I mentioned before, you're going to dispatch your coyotes quicker, and probably just as important, they're going to be able to get away from these tight gaps that you're trying to utilize and make them dispatch over around the tree out of the way of the trail and preserve these nice gaps we're going to be using. Very important. Now, over the years, I've found the easiest way to add an extension to a snare is to take the end loop of the extension, put it through the terminal end of the snare loop, put it right through it, bring your loop, the actual loop that you're catching the animal with, I'll show you in just a second, back up through the extension, and just from previous experience, make sure your support collar is there too, so you don't have to go hunt for it when it slides down your cable. And pull the two cables together. Just takes a half a second to make sure they both mesh together, and you make a nice spot just like that. And these nuts, you have a 3/32 cable held by a 6-32 nut, and you have your 5/64 held together by a 4-40 nut. I've never had any problem with the 7x7 with one nut. If you're using 1x19, you might use 2 nuts, or you should be using 2 nuts because they will break. But for what I'm showing you here today, this is a quick, effective way of putting the two cables together for your extension and your snare. A second, and I think, fairly effective and economical way to attach the two together is to just use a 3/16 quick link and add the two together that way. And it's real simple and easy to just crimp it down like that to screw it tight. And this one's been painted just a dull gray color, dull drab color, just so they're not big and shiny hanging there. But this is super effective too. A third way would be to use like a universal swivel with 2 J hooks or 2 rivets on the end and put one on each one and use a J hook tool, S hook tool to open them. But these quick links are cheap, around 35 cents a piece. The simple matter, if they do get gummed up with mud or snow or ice, to come up with your pliers and put it on and open it up and add on another snare if you need to. You can use these in the same way by wrapping your cable around the tree, putting a quick link on it, and just 4 or 5 good twists, you have a real quick fastener to go around that tree and super strong. Now the main component of properly hanging a snare in my opinion, is a snare support of some sort. And this is 30 inches of 1/4 inch cold roll with 20 inches of a number 11 wire welded on the top. We put a few twists on the top here so it doesn't have a sharp 90 where it'll break off. Some guys prefer number 11 wire. I prefer the 11 gauge wire with my 564 snares. This is very rigid, very solid. It'll support any weight of snare, and I find it has a lot less refusals, or at least a percentage less refusals than going to number 9. So I'm using these 30-inch cold roll with the end flattened down, and some guys are putting fender washers on, they're putting different things on, and I've never had the problem with this. Use them just like this. The end's flattened down enough to drive in frozen ground. I lay it down along my leg at times and against my foot on frozen ground conditions and drive it in that way. Makes it a little more rigid and I drive in the ground easy. And also when I'm pulling them, I put a pair of vice grips at ground level and use my stake puller to pull them out. So I've never had the problem where I thought maybe they spun in the wind. I see guys say that you have to put different things on them, and if you feel you have to, go ahead and weld something on. Anything will work. Another piece of rebar or another piece of material welded about a foot off the ground where it drives in will make it more rigid if you think you need to. I haven't seen that. Now the support itself is going to be off to the side of the snare, where the snare is going to be hung, off to the side of the trail. I like to keep it within about 6 inches to a foot of the trail. If there's a tuft of grass or a cedar tree or a sagebrush or whatever, something substantial to hide it, so much the better. And you simply drive it into the ground to make it rigid. And I like to have it in, this one here isn't very solid, so I'm going to have to try a different spot. And you have to do that. That's a good example of having a solid place. This one's going in farther. If I didn't have it solid, like I just had it in 6 inches and it didn't hold, that'd make your snare not rigid and supported right, and that's a good example of what not to do. So I moved it over about 4 inches and got it in nice and solid. I like to keep it down no higher than the surrounding vegetation. It's surprising how much this straight line, even well painted and blended in, how much these show up, these straight lines. So you want to have it blend in as well as possible. One of the things you can do is this. I'm going to bend this over here. If you want to, with the 11 gauge, you can wrap it around some existing vegetation and actually form your location or restrict your location down a little bit more and have a natural blocking. That's one of the beauties of using a support like this, is you can manufacture things a little bit or manipulate things a little bit to make your snare frame the hole a little better, or the gap we're going to call it. And that's really important. This is really added on locations that, like I say before, 15-20 years ago we couldn't use. This has actually made snaring easier for a lot of us because we were able to use kind of marginal type places. Now the second thing you want to bear in mind with or do is having your pigtail or your end of your support wire to the side and slightly above where you want your snare to hang. And you want to keep in mind how high your snare is going to be when you get done, when you're finished hanging it, and you have to allow for some, well, I'll call it slack in the extension or the pigtail of the wire, so you have it when you get done. It isn't bent at an angle too much or too far down. In this case, this snare is going to be 9.5 to 10.5 inches off the ground, intended for coyotes. So I'm going to leave my loop about right here. And this wants to bend up, and that's another example of things that'll happen. So we're going to bend this around to where we want it and really wrap it on tight and still have that extension of the pigtail out here into the trail. Now bear in mind, we're not in a real trail. We pulled it out here so we could see what we were doing. Okay, now the snare support's solid. It's off to the side of the trail. The next important thing is to use your support collar to solidly attach it to your support wire. And this is really super important, okay? So basically what you're doing is you're opening your loop up to the approximate size you want it, and the size of the loop will be dictated by the size of the gap in the trail. If you're in a 10-inch trail, a grass trail, try to use a 10-inch loop, and that's 10 inches wide, which in this kind of cable will be about 11 to 12 inches tall. Open it up to the size you want it, and by using your support collar, jam it in, and by using the right size support collar and the right size wire, the right combination, it should be anchored solidly. This is just a support, and this is not going to hold the animal here with the support. This is just to support the snare. And if this is not tight here or snug, what happens is when the animal goes through, the head goes through the snare, the chest hits the bottom, and what happens is if this is not nice and snug, the cable will give, and what happens is that cable will sometimes fall down, or the snare loop will start to fall down, and you'll get way too many hip catches or even actually misses if this is not solid. This is a really important part of snaring, so when the coyote's head goes through, the only thing that gives is the lock. And he goes about a half a step or a step, he pulls it down around his neck, hopefully, and then the snare pulls off the support, and he goes over here and dispatches. Okay? Now, it seems simple, but you can't believe the amount of people I talk to that still fall down on that very basic way of hanging a snare. They're still putting wraps of wire, they're still doing bobby pins, or doing, I see guys using black tape and stuff still. And to me, there's nothing simpler with using the right wire combination with a support collar, having it right tight behind the lock, and so when the animal goes through it, the only thing that gives is the lock. That's the main thing with snaring. Now, the height is very important, and I carry lineman's pliers. These are just 7-inch. If you can get a shot of that, about 3.5 inches above them is 10 inches, which is my happy medium. 9.5 to 10.5 for coyotes, from the ground to the bottom of the snare. 10 inches. For me, that's the ultimate height for hanging a coyote snare. Now, a few other things I'm going to show you real quick is lock position. Now, envision this being 12 o'clock on a clock, this being 6 o'clock. I want my snare lock up at around 1 to 2 o'clock, not tilted back like this, and certainly not the top where it wants to fall down. Okay? When you have it pointed down, or even at 12 o'clock position, too many times the wind or an animal walking on the trail like a deer or whatever will bump up against it, and what happens is the loop will fall down and be on the ground in that position just like that. This is just a close-up of the support collar and the lock position at 1 o'clock. And also with this type of compression spring, I've learned over the years, as of a lot of good snaremen have told me and noticed it too, by having this compression spring at this position, it acts like an outrigger, a counterbalance, and will hang here in the wind a lot better than a lot of snares and different lock configurations will. And I'm going to show here real quick, we're going to close up of what happens when the lock does fall down by a non-target, or let's say a coyote even sees a little bit and rubs up against it. Now, I've noticed over the years, you know, I've snared for 31 years now, and in a lot of different conditions, a lot of different areas, mainly for coyotes and some for bobcats and fox. With the 7x7, when it gets knocked down in the wind or gets knocked down by a non-target and falls down, this is kind of the position it takes, just a real tiny loop. You don't seem to have the problems of leg catches and non-target catches like this. Now, in contrast, a 1x19 cable being a lot stiffer in configuration, a lot of times when it falls down in the same situation, it's almost a half a loop hanging right in the trail. And you get a lot more leg catches and non-desirable catches in the long run. Now, it might not be a huge factor for you, it might only be a couple a year, but every year I have a few people tell me that they had a coyote chew out, and usually towards the end of the season they'll call me back, or I'll talk to them later and they'll say, oh yeah, it was caught with a hind foot or a front foot or whatever. And by using these 7x7 snares, I've just learned in the long run They'll take a lot more weather, a lot more wind, and just a lot more, be a lot less maintenance on them than with the 1x19. This is just to show you the contrast of a painted snare and a non-painted snare. But I also want to talk briefly about one thing. When I'm painting my locks and my springs or whatever, you can just say your locks, depends what you're using, and I make them a neutral color, a lot of guys will say, oh, that lock's pretty big, or that maybe you're using a different color. At times I'll use a slightly different color. And what that actually is doing, I don't think at a 1 o'clock position or 2, slightly above or to the side of the trail, slightly like this, I don't think you're hurting the coyote, your refusals or anything. I don't think you're increasing refusal at all. I think it's just actually the opposite usually. This lock on the outside, on the upper corner of your gap, is actually making them center into the trail and into the snare better. Just like a obstruction, like a bough over here, if this was hanging in the trail slightly, no different, it's going to get them to center in the trail. The right height in the center of the trail, properly supported, solidly supported, is still the main factors in being successful in snaring. I've seen pictures people will send me. I've seen pictures at conventions. Guys selling stuff will show me, and they'll have 3 or 4 bobcats or 3 or 4 coyotes, and they're all hip caught, or maybe one's neck caught, the other 2 are hip caught. And I'll say, you're using 1x19, aren't you? And they go, yeah, how do you know that? I go, well, I can tell. You're getting way more hip catches than you need to be. And that's why I've come back to the 7x7, solidly supported like this, and also with the 1x19, it tends to close a little faster. And I've also noticed at times that they won't take the wind where it wants to spring shut, and that's why I'd never load my snares. To me, that's been a fad, in my opinion, that's completely unfounded. I run a fairly long check on snares because it's legal to do here in the West. I don't want to go into them snare places more than every few days, and I have found by having the snares loaded on a windy day, you have a lot more knockdown. You can maximize your effectiveness just by using these simple, time-proven methods that we've come up with over the years. Some of us serious snaremen. Okay, right in the center of the screen is a real good gap between 2 cedar trees, and if you look right over here, I'll zoom in a little bit and you see the front feet of a snared coyote, and I'll give you a little closer look here. Okay, here's the snared coyote. Like I mentioned, it was dispatched real quick, didn't tear up anything. It's got about 12 foot of cable, goes up around, wraps around, comes back across the trail. You can see it there, and I had it tied up here in the brush. I know it's going to be hard for you guys to see, but it's anchored on a real thick limb up here. So this spot can be used again. It was a spot that no doubt will catch a coyote here. The coyote had gone through here in the snow. 25 yards up a cedar draw from where we just caught a coyote in the trail, and we had set several snares up this drainage, the places the coyotes had gone in. And this is a gap here about 1.5 feet wide that I'd narrowed down by manipulating the brush a little bit. And you can see the cable right there, and if you look over here, there's another caught coyote. This coyote's back here in the brush. Just another example of it's not a definite trail, just a gap, just a spot it went through. Another one of them places where you got to get out and follow them around the snow a little bit and see their spots and get them set. Okay, we're in a rim rock situation. Some rocks and some nice gaps here, a few cedar trees, and some coyotes been messing around in here hunting these rabbits when the weather gets tough. And right to the left of that cedar there's a snare support, nice tight gap, and then the 10-foot snare stretched down here to a coyote, just stretched out right in the trail. And this snare would take either cats or coyotes in a place like this, whatever shows up first. Just a real simple spot to set. I anchored to the tree It's a pretty good sized cedar tree. It's old. That's the kind of stuff that grows in these locations. Real harsh environment, but it made a nice anchor and a nice naturally narrowed down trail for a coyote or a cat to go through. Nice pale coyote, real late in the season, but very skinnable. I'll move around to the other side and show what it looks like. Here's the location from the top. Just a little gap about a foot wide. Narrowed it down with the snare support by bending that cedar bough in there a little bit, and it was just like a little rock chute going down through here. And this is real common to catch coyotes in these places. They'll run up through these bared off rocky ridges with rim rocks and stuff in pairs a lot of times, and one will run up around where the rocks or the rabbits are at, and the other one will run to the bottom of the rock pile, and this one's just cut in between the two. And I got a few other sets in here, and there's nothing caught in them, but this one lone snare paid off. Okay, this is a real steep draw on both sides and a flat bottom, and we have a place here where there's a big cedar tree right in the center of it, and the coyotes go on either side. Just kind of a real natural funnel down spot, and right in the center you can see a dead coyote dispatched there in the snare. On the left side, I laid a limb in there when I first came here and scouted around here a little bit. There'd been a real big windstorm here early October, and we had several big branches and limbs laying on the ground here. I just kind of blocked it down a little bit more, and then came back later and hung a snare here. Okay, you can see the snare support right here, and there's the coyote laying basically right in the gap. I see it just broke a limb off here and did a little chewing. That's one of the problems with around cedar boughs. They do act like a big shock absorber sometimes, and they get wrapped around and fight around a little bit before they dispatch. But it did the job here. Here's the same location. We're about 30 feet above it. You can see the coyote there in the gap. The cedar tree is blocking the trail down. It's only about a foot wide there. It worked out real good. This big cedar tree was in the bottom of the draw, and it's low enough branches it keeps the coyotes from going underneath there much, unless they're really tight and they're after a rabbit or whatever. They kind of skirt around it. That's why I took advantage of the spot. Real natural funnel down spot, and there's a coyote right there in the center. This is just another shot of what we had to deal with here. Real nice pale coyote. Okay, we're in another spot here just about 50 yards below where that last coyote was caught, and the trails kind of divide. One goes around this cedar tree. This is about 30 foot across. It's pretty substantial, but big patch of thick cedars, and the trail on the right side is way too wide. There's nothing you can do with it for quite a ways up, and I did snare a coyote farther up the draw, but there's nothing for quite a while. But having done this for a long time, I knew that some coyotes would go to the left of this cedar patch, and this little small cedar here is just on the left side of a real perfect gap. That's the outside blocking, you could call it, of a real nice gap. I'm going to move up a little bit, but this brush here laying here in this old thick tree and bared off branches are not going to try to go through that very easily. And there's kind of a point, kind of obstruction there, and there's a gap just right to the right of that cedar tree. Real natural spot. We've got a coyote caught there too, it looks like. Here's a close-up of the same location with the little cedar on the left and the support wire on the snare support on the right side. And that gap's reusable, and the extension cable goes back, and there's a very dispatched coyote back in here. Looked like it dispatched fairly fast. There's nothing really chewed up. Yeah, the cable was tied off back there. I see the 3/32 extension back in here, and it goes wrapping around these logs. You can see it heading off there, not an angle. Back to this dispatch coyote. We'll drag him under and see what it looks like. Just another important spot to look for Just an obstruction like this broken down branch and this old tree broken down made a point, and luckily there was an outside blocking there, and we used that nice gap. Just one of them spots you just learn over the years of snaring where these animals are going to go. It's not a trail, just a natural gap. Here's a location I'm trying. I haven't set it before. I've trapped in here several times, but with the weather conditions the way they are, I decided to follow these coyotes around a little bit and see where they're going. And I found a good spot here between this big cedar and this rock outcropping. This rock's probably 10 or 15 foot tall and about several hundred feet around. And on the lower side of it, the ground just kind of sloughs off and there's not a lot of cover. But on the upper side, between the rock and the cedar, there always seems to be a few rabbit tracks. And maybe 2 months ago I noticed a coyote had gone down through here, and the other coyote with it stayed on the road back up here where the pickup was parked, 20-30 foot away. I'm right next to the pickup, not one of my few snaring locations I'm this close to the vehicle. But right here at a transition of sagebrush and down what we call breaks or cedar breaks and rocks, and these coyotes hunt these edges, of course, like bobcats do also. And this particular place right here, I have a snare right between the rock and the narrowest place where the cedars come in. And we'll walk down here and check it. I'm pretty sure we got one because I don't see the snare hanging. Yeah, I was right. The snare support is right here on the left side of the rock where the tree is at, and it was right out the edge of this bough, which made a real good natural guide. It was a fairly open snare, and there's the cable and there's the coyote over there. Looks like a big old dog coyote. We'll walk over and see what we got here. I found the snare support right here on the ground. Isn't very often they pull them out like that. Here's the coyote, and he just went simply around this tree, just a natural tangle situation, natural kill pole I call them, organic kill pole. And here's the actual gap, one of them spots where you go, well, that should work, and by blocking it off a little bit, it paid off. It took a while. On the way in here, I noticed where there was a single coyote. It's the middle of March, so these coyotes definitely should be paired, have bred, and be together. And when I saw the single track running down the road, or parallel with the road, not crossing the road, parallel with the road, being careful where it went, I figured I had something caught down here, and I was right. And there's a chance it's a third coyote, and I might have the other half of this pair caught. But I just used this tree as an outside blocking, used that bough, had the snare support drove in the ground, had that bough picked up, and used it as an outside blocking, and used the rock on the right as the barrier, and put in a 10-inch snare, 10.5 inches off the ground, and picked up this big dog coyote. With this 10 or 12 foot of cable and extension, he just wrapped around quick, and none of these limbs were even broke off. I wouldn't even known there was a coyote here, except for I knew the snare was missing. Just a real typical, quickly dispatched big coyote. Looks like a big dog here. Nice big pale coyote. This spot was real easy to get to, so I just simply looped the cable back through the extension loop and had it about 2-3 foot off the ground. This tree's about 4 inches in diameter, and if I had it off the ground, there's a chance it would have wrapped around it, taken up about 2 foot of cable every time I went around it. Depends how high off the foot or the ground it was. But in this case, it just went 2 foot over here to this other tree, 3 foot, and wrapped around it. By having it solid like that on a good substantial tree, allows for quick dispatching, and also helps the release system work. And any non-target, off chance of catching a non-target, would still have enough energy to pop that release barrel off this Amberg snare. And this scenario is pretty typical how I use these. As long as I can get to something substantial, I'll use that extension cable rather than a stake or an earth anchor. Okay, we're down in the bottom of a deep cedar draw, and it's late winter. There's been some water actually running down the bottom of this thing. We're in that time of year where there's snow and thawing snow and a little bit of water here and there. And last time I came down here, there's this barricade of cedars kind of across about 2/3 of the draw, and part of the draw is partially blocked by this log, which in reality would not be a deterrent for a coyote by any means. But I did notice last time I was here in the fresh snow, right here in the center of the picture right now, a coyote was ducking through between these two main cedars. And I see we got a catch there. I'm going to move up here and show you, but it does show where they will be funneled in through this thicker brush that goes across the trail, across the draw. It opens up to the side, you'll see that, and we've got other snares in here, of course, but this is the kind of place you look for. I walked up here maybe 150 yards looking for suitable places. You can see the snare support here to the left, and the coyote was going right through here. Right in the center you'll see my cable going from right to left. You just barely see the legs of this coyote. We'll get another shot of it. But there's just enough brush. There's probably, depth wise, there's probably 2 to 3 foot of brush where the coyote ducks through that, which is perfect. It breaks up the outline good. It funnels them right through the same exact spot. And I could blend that snare in real easy. I had it tied off over here to a real prominent cedar right there in the center. You can see it looped around the tree, a real easy place. Had the extension cable coming down, and ended up snaring another middle of the winter coyote kind of late in the season here. Kind of frozen here in the ice and the snow that's came and gone about every other day here lately. Just keeps coming down and then melting and freezing and thawing. Kind of muddy getting in here. It's kind of a peninsula that sticks down in the creek, and this trail cuts across the peninsula, kind of a crossover type place. And we've got a coyote caught here. It's kind of a well-used cow trail during the summer months. You see it right here, and it's been kind of muddy in here with the snow melting, and the second coyote is caught right up here. This pair has been in here. I took several coyotes out of here this winter, and I knew there was going to be another pair show up here, and sure enough they have. We'll walk up and take a look at it too. Here's the second coyote. That 12-foot snare was anchored over here to the side, and here the snare support is tipped over. The snare was hung right in this little gap right here, and the coyote just went out and wrapped around a sagebrush out here, full length of the snare, and laying there dead. Real typical deal here, even low sagebrush. It worked out good. Got a pair, like I say, probably 20 to 30 feet apart, would be over 30 feet, back up to this other coyote. Worked out good. We got a pair of them right here in a hurry. We have a little trail between two cedar trees, kind of a bigger one on the left, and some low bushes on the right. There's just a little tight gap through there, about a foot wide, and we have one, or we had a snare there. We just come in here and looked, and we've got a coyote right there about 10 foot away, tied up. There's the dispatch coyote, stretched out the full length of the cable, about 12 foot, and wrapped around a cedar bough and laying there dead. And I'll go back real slower to the location. Right here, there's kind of a trail up through there, right about in the center of the screen where the snare was hanging. Pale coyote. And only track we've seen in here so far is this one, only sign. The snow's been melting and thawing so much it's hard to keep up. But last time I was in here I did see one lone track, and this probably is it. But looks like we'll see what we got caught farther up. Okay, this is a look from the top side of the cover. It's only about 6 or 8 feet through there, but there was a track here earlier when I set this, and the snare was just to the right of the dark green bush. There's kind of a gap through there, and oh, it drops 2 or 3 feet through here, kind of a go down effect. And on this side to the right, it's kind of a barrier, and you know, not that a coyote or a bobcat couldn't get through it, but and they will. You'll see places where they'll push through it. But in a case like this nice little gap here, especially between 2 different kinds of vegetation, and the fact that they've already been down through here, coming in, going, just a matter of time before one shows back up. Right there is where the snare was hanging. Okay, we're in a brushy draw, goes for about a half a mile, and we're at the upper end of it. A little light buckbrush and a few cedars, not many, a couple cottonwood trees here and there. But on the upper trail in the sagebrush, right over there in the center of the screen, is a coyote caught, and it was the farthest snare up the draw and the highest one up on the bank. It snowed in coyote tracks from this morning. The wind's really blowing here, and I basically trailed that single pair of tracks right up here to the head of the draw. You can see the circle over there. It looks like it didn't dispatch quick, and I'm gonna guess probably a hip snare. We're gonna get a little closer. I can see it from here, and I can see where it chewed up some brush above it with that 12-foot snare anchored pretty tight, pretty solid down there, I imagine to a stake. And he still tore up some stuff this morning. Just another shot of the draw we're in, and it's so sparse here, especially with 8 inches of fresh snow, and these snares kind of stand out even when they're spray painted white or gray. Just another example how you've got to pick the best 5 or 6 spots in this particular draw to get the coyotes caught. There's just so many places you think are going to work until you get there, and it's actually a 1.5 feet wide, and just doesn't narrow down as much as I like. So I kind of had to cover the whole draw here by walking up farther and finding some of these places that weren't so marginal. And this coyote came down the trail today with all this fresh snow and got caught. Just kind of an example of what you got to do sometimes, rather than plunk the snares in the first couple spots you come to and call them good. You got to kind of check out the location and find your best spots and wait them out. Here we're right at the actual location where this coyote's caught, and you can see why I picked this spot. If I show you right, there's just like a natural barrier of buckbrush coming off the hill, and yes, with a foot of snow on there, they will migrate up through there and hunt through the rabbits up through there. But traveling on here comes to a point, and then below it over the bank is a real thick bunch of brush again, that real thorny type of stuff, a lot of thistles and stuff down through there. And that's why I picked this natural gap right up here on top, right on the upper trail. There's some sagebrush right here too, and that's the right spot right there. That naturally funnels them coyotes and cats right down to this spot, and you can see the trail going up through there. Way too sparse, and I'd love to have 3 or 4 snares in this trail, but I can't. There's only 1 or 2 spots right through here that's any good enough to narrow them down, but this is the exact spot here. Snare support right off the trail, just slightly bent over, and just a few feet away is the coyote here dispatched, laying there on top of all this brush. It's definitely a hip-caught coyote. What reason it didn't dispatch quicker? But and that does happen. I'll tell you why. It can happen at any time. Snaring's not 100% perfect, but when you get deep snow, 6 to 8 inches of snow on coyote snares that are hung 10 inches off the ground, it just, they're just getting too low. The alternative is plowing your way in here every 4 or 5 days and knocking the snow away from them, but you just don't catch coyotes in this part of the world that way. So I stretch it out a little bit more and try to stay away from them. I check them from a distance, but I don't walk down here every single time. And this snare obviously was just a little bit too low, but we'll take it anyway. There's the snare support pigtail, and there's the gap. It's too chewed up to use again. I won't use this spot. He beat it down dragging that cable around. We'll just find a spot farther down hopefully and go from there. It's a pretty good sized dog coyote all by himself down through here. This real good sagebrush draw coming out of the rough country is really a good corridor travel way. And then also, probably more importantly, I'm sure there was a litter of coyotes raised up in here in this rough country. So they'll start filtering out of here. I got some different sets through here, 4 or 5 I can see from the pickup, and this is going to be a hot spot, I'm sure, before it's over with. I think it's really important to check your traps, especially coyote sets, from as far away as possible. In this case, I'm probably 100 yards and 150 yards from 2 sets, just to keep the tracks down and the scent away and the sign away from them. And I grew up trapping that way. I grew up in the UP of Michigan, trained by a real top-notch bounty coyote trapper who really was super paranoid about leaving too many tracks around in the sand or whatever. And I've seen it way too many times in my life that coyotes can get pretty paranoid of all the foot traffic. So I like to check them from as far away as possible, but I'll still go over there, every few weeks, and if I haven't made a catch, of course, but I'll go over there and re-lure in 2 or 3 weeks, unless we get a big rain, and I'll go re-lure more often. But not only does it save you a lot of time from walking over there, but I will guarantee you in the long run you'll catch more coyotes, especially in the area they've been worked on before, or they're used to little trapper activity. They're kind of paranoid that way. You can actually bounce them out of an area. So I set these draws and these trails coming up with 5 different sets, and I'll just wait them out, and then hopefully someday there'll be a couple coyotes here. It wouldn't surprise me at all to come back and have 2 or 3 caught here all within sight. Now when I set these 5 sets, I got 3 back over towards the pickup on another trail, but when I set these I lined everything up so I could park in one place and sight across there and check them. One's on this high bank out here in front of me where the trail comes down, so you got kind of a dual effect here. You got the high rim, you got a trail crossing it, and then across the far wash, the far draw, is another one. And they're all pretty much in plain sight. The reason I come over here a little closer on foot to check was because I saw something I thought was tore up, but I was off by about 10 foot. And it was actually something tore up, probably a cow or something tore up a sagebrush earlier. So now I know exactly where the set is from a distance, and I can line everything up and check them all just in a matter of seconds. And when you're setting them, try not to go down over the bank or get over someplace where you have to second guess if you got an animal there or not. Really keep that in mind if you expect to check them from a distance. You got to be able to see the whole set. Too many times I've had an animal laying down behind a sagebrush. You don't go over there and check it and you go, oh, there's an animal, a coyote laying there, or a cat. Not all coyotes jump up and bounce around. A lot of them do, but some lay down, especially if they think they're still hidden. They'll lay down. So you got to be able to make sure you can reference the set and make sure there's nothing there, or the trap isn't snapped off. There's nothing worse than checking an empty, snapped off trap for a week, and then you finally walk over and figure out that's been laying there on top of the snow the whole time. So you got to set them where you can check them and be realistic about it if you have an animal or not. Don't try to second guess yourself. In this open prairie environment, whenever you come across a nice creek or a draw like this with good cover in it, that's going to hold deer and birds of various kinds and rabbits, of course, there'll be a lot of activity up and down it. In this particular one, there's still a few cows, so I can't snare it right now, and it's still a little warm out, even though it's the end of November. So what I'll do is hit some of these trails coming in and out of here. And then in this case, a lot of these trails are on these long points or peninsulas that stick down into this draw. This is a real well-defined trail made by the cows and the deer going down to the water that's in the bottom. And here again, there'll be a lot of activity coming up and down these well-defined places. They've also got the dirt kind of churned up, you know, real nice and soft, so you can see if there's any recent activity in these places. Even if you're not going to set traps in these spots, this kind of place you want to look to kind of monitor or kind of get a little, you know, barometer of what's going on here. Now, right along the edge of this trail, the bank falls off real steep, so they're going to be a natural funnel place here. There's just a little bit of a bend. I just love these places because if they're coming across from behind me, from this saddle kind of behind me, they'll still hit this edge. You'll see a lot of activity kind of congregate right around here. So on the upwind side of it, I put a T-bone set just off the trail. I stayed off the trail about 3 or 4 feet just to try to keep away from some of the cow activity that's still here. But the T-bone set, a flat set, is just off the trail, so they'll still see it, the visual of that, and they'll still, of course, smell it. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about trap selection. And my choice for the last 28 years, 29 years, I've been using more and more dogless traps all the time. I started with the old Montgomerys, the high lever Montgomerys. In 2003, by the time I moved from Wyoming to Montana and worked predator control several years, the old Montgomery business, you know, had long since been gone, and a friend of mine and I started a trap company called Montana Trap Company, and what we did was we took what I considered the flaws out of the Montgomery trap high lever, and we added in a heavier base plate. We used the same high levers. We used the same dogless design. We bubble tipped the jaw tips. And then also, which was a crucial point in the old Montgomerys, was on the pan crimp here, we welded that, so it wouldn't come off there. And then we also used the same music wired springs, which are super strong, and then we added a stronger and longer spring pin, which can be used for forecoiling. Now, to be honest with you, these traps are so strong, right, new from out of the box, I honestly don't think there's any reason to forecoil them. It's my preferred trap above anything else I've ever used, actually, just because of its simplicity, and I'll show you why. I don't like to miss coyotes, or bobcats, or fox, or anything else for that matter. When I set a trap, I intend to catch something, and with a dogless design, with a piece of screen, which I'll show you here, virtually anything that steps inside the jaw of the trap's going to go off. With a dog type trap, and I do have some dog type traps in our line, with a dog type trap that goes over the jaw and hooks into the pan, roughly 30% of your jaw spread, the animal can step and the trap won't go off. That's just one of the beauties of the dogless design, that virtually anywhere from here to even back in here when you're using a screen, the trap will go off, and that just eliminates so many more misses. Also, with no dog to get bent up, it just a little more maintenance free, and then also there is a percentage of coyotes that will step on the pan and the dog and will get pushed up, and you get a lot of bad catches that way. So over the years I've come to really rely pretty much exclusively on these number 3 dogless traps, this Montana number 3 special. This one was modified by a friend of mine for me. We've gone to a shorter lamination on top rather than go wrap around, which are hard on your hands. This one is a standard jaw. This does not have an offset jaw. The offsets would have lugs in each corner, which I prefer because we want the rolled edge jaw to still come in contact with the coyote's foot. So this is my preference here, just a standard jaw with a laminated. And also these are short base plates we've gone to, rather than the longer ones and the heavier ones. I really do think the heavier the trap, the more foot damage you have. So we opted to go to a shorter base plate, which is still plenty strong with the heavy base on the Montana trap. We have a heavy-duty D-ring and then several swivels. Now he went ahead and put in a shock spring in these. I tried 2 dozen of these, and I can see maybe some benefit on toe catches, but to be honest with you, when they got muddy and froze up, they were just like a steel rod there. I didn't really like that, but some places you have to have them. Some places people prefer them in the live market. I'm not saying they're bad, it's just that I don't think they're going to be a ticket for me. And I'm still using the universal swivel on the end. As I mentioned before, I use steel screen. It doesn't have to be the super stiff stuff, but I like stuff a couple grades heavier than some of the stuff you find in the average hardware store. I actually special order this in 100-foot chunks. I cut it 5 1/4 wide by 6 1/2 long. Now you can cut a notch in it if you want to, right here, to go underneath the jaws more, but honestly I get by without doing that. If you have time to do it, that's fine. I just pick up the free jaw like that, slightly cup it so it goes under the corners, and let go. The trap's well adjusted, so basically you just increased your pan area right there, so anything that steps basically within about 80 or 90% of that jaw for that trap's going to go off. And it's been called several things, from kill area to, you know, catch area. I mean, I just call it a high percentage area, which is to me really important, because you're not always dirt trapping in really good conditions. You're out trapping in snow, or maybe snow comes later after you set it, and your set looks different. Your animal's approach will be different, and just a skiff of snow can change things. And I just don't like to come up and find traps just slightly off, you know, in position, but the animals stepped inside the jaws and not snapped them off. So I went to these years and years ago, and I totally rely on them. I actually relied on them so much that I actually got into the trap business because I needed the traps. I needed the traps worse than I needed to be in the business. But I was running out of good dogless traps, so we built these, and the success has just been, you know, really good. It's very gratifying to provide really good equipment to people and have them send me letters throughout the year and call me throughout the year and say, man, I need another dozen of those. You know, they just, a lot of my problems have been eliminated since you showed me how to use these. Anyway, we're going to make a couple basic sets here and show you some blocking methods I prefer, and try to eliminate some of them misses. Now for a hammer, I've graduated up to one of these. I don't see them on the market. We had these built. They're actually a hammer with 4 steel rods going down through the handle. This is probably my 5th, maybe 6th year of using these. I got 3 of them. I beat them up. I'm tough on equipment. I've gone through as high as 3 standard trapper's hammers in one day in our tough soil that I bought from the supply houses and stuff, and they just don't stand up. So I graduated up to one of these and then welded our own tangs on here. I can't say enough good about them. Another tool I just can't be without is a cut down tile spade. I've been using these for several years now too. They're sharp on the sides. They're cut down to 4. This happens to be a 4 1/2 inch width, and that's just your standard fiberglass handle tile spade that we use a lot. Only they're about 1.5 inches narrow and a lot shorter and sharp, and they really cut saw good. They make a nice perfect dirt hole, the right size, into a variety of like sod or grass, whatever. And I just quit using the little trowels several years ago, except for maybe in loose soil for fox trapping where you want even smaller holes. But even my kids carry these now. We use them for, we use them for dispatching. We don't use them for pulling stakes. They're not made for that, although there is times I'm tempted to reach under and kind of hook it up, and I do get my, underneath there, I do pull the trap stick enough so I can get my S-hook tool in there. But this is the kind of equipment I really like. I used this one for several years. My son paints the handle every once in a while. He tries to get the fiberglass paint, or to paint, but it won't stick. But this is what I use for digging dirt holes, right here. 4 1/2 inch cut down tile. There's such a variety of terrain and vegetation types and just different locales, different locations. It's hard to show somebody that lives like in the east what we do here in Wyoming, but the basics are the same, I assure you. I like a backing of some sort, and it can be higher, don't get me wrong. I've caught lots and lots of coyotes under a pine tree. But I like a backing about this high, basically so they can't come from behind. Okay, that's real simple. And I dig my trap bed. I'm going to show you a couple of variations here, but I don't dig my bed a whole lot bigger than the trap itself. Now if this is going to be a dirt hole, I'm going to have the hole back in here, but I usually start by digging the bed. the size of the trap. And I'll pull that dirt out like this. And I want my dirt hole back in an angle, kind of like this, but there again, I don't go crazy and have the same angle every time. Basically, when I get done, I want my hole at this angle pretty much. I want it oval shape or elongated rather than perfectly round. Because if you sit and watch a coyote or a dog or whatever dig a hole or go back to where an animal's been digging, you'll see that. And when I get done, I prefer to have a few of these roots and grass sticking down the dirt hole. That's real common to see that. And the variety of depths, I like to have at least 8 inches. I don't go down a whole lot deeper than that if it's harder. I just say enough is enough. But I don't go crazy. Now let's say I ran into a rock right here. You know, I don't get crazy and start digging the hole a lot bigger. I kind of work around it. I don't mind if a rock or a stick shows up. I just want to have something to be able to put that bait down. That's all I'm trying to do, and I drag that dirt out in front. We got our trap bed set in here already. Now here's one of the beauties of the dogless trap. A lot of people get hung up on which direction the dog goes in relationship to the attractor, whatever, to the bone, to the whatever. I don't worry about it, but just out of convenience sake, that can be pointed towards it. With a dogless, it can be turned around backwards, sideways, whatever. I like to have my free jaw picked up, and I'll bed my stake, and in this case, my shock spring underneath it. So everything sits level. Now, what I'm going to show you here is contradictory to what a lot of stuff you read in magazines or on trapping forums or hear from a lot of people. I don't pay a lot of attention to how far back from the hole the center of the pan is. I tend to set a lot tighter for coyotes than a lot of people do. And I'll tell you why. When you start setting back too far, and I see 9 inches back and 2 inches to the side, to me it's all BS. Too many coyotes come from the side, too many coyotes come from the back. They don't work it very hard. I like to use walk-through sets. And for that reason, when I get done burying this trap, and there's a variety, I use wax dirt, we use coal shale, I see people using peat moss, whatever, and there again, I don't want to fill this video up, this DVD up, with different ways to cover a trap, because you might live in a totally different type of soil. But basically, I put a good 1/2 inch on top of it at a dirt hole. I keep it back in a long pattern rather than a big alluvial fan, I call them, which aren't natural for coyotes. I like them when they dig like this, and the dirt's going back. And sometimes I'll use this clod right here as an outside blocking. I never set, virtually never set a canine trap without an outside blocking. And you can set it a little bit tighter if you want, a little bit farther back, but any kind of canine set, dirt hole or flat, I want an outside blocking. This is all going to be buried. I just took it out of here so you can see. Now, a classic for me is a cow chip. That's one of my favorite things to set. This is my outside blocking. This will be on top of the dirt. Of course, this will be buried. You got to do a little imagination here. I use this something back here. You can either take the wad of sod you cut out of here, maybe uncovered a rock. You can put a cactus in here if you live in the West. Cow chip like this. This is already all buried. And you got this outside blocking. And to me, this is the most important part of trapping, is to block that trap off so the animal doesn't miss it, okay? Like I already said, if you got this trap back here 9 inches, like I see people saying, there's a lot of space for coyotes to work that set and not get caught. I tend to keep it up tighter, put an outside blocking here. It can be a stick, it can be anything. I don't like to take a stick like this and jam it in the ground. I don't like that. That's just not natural usually, unless it's something, maybe you got a sagebrush right here, you can use it for an outside blocking. But I like to put something here they're not going to want to step on very bad. And what that does, if a coyote comes from the side, and a lot of them do, they come in and they got to walk through this. This is a walk-through set. I see a walk-through set referred to like as a exposed bobcat set I see so popular nowadays, and probably rightfully so. But they're not. That's not a walk-through to me. I really think walk-throughs are something like this. It could be a cat set too, but a coyote set with an outside blocking, where if they come in from the front to make this angle, that's always been my theory, the more footprints on top of the trap. If they come from the side and walk through it, more footprints on top of the trap. If they come from the front, they don't want to step on this, and they set directly on top of the trap. And what we're trying to do is cut down the misses. And like I say, I will not set a coyote trap, a canine trap of any kind, or a bobcat. If I was going to be trapping bobcats, I wouldn't set it with some kind of outside blocking. I want that animal to have to step on top of the trap. Now you watch a coyote or a dog walk up to a pan of food, they don't stand back a foot and reach way out. Their feet are almost right alongside of the bowl, and they reach right down between their mouth, or with their mouth right between their feet. That's the principle that I'm using here, is I want to block them off and avoid those misses. Now you do have some coyotes that come back 2 foot away and they look at everything and leave. There's no doubt you're going to have some of those, but that isn't as high a percentage as the coyotes you're going to miss if you set back too far and let them footprints show up right up here, right tight to that hole, and then leave because your trap's set back here at 9 or 10 inches. So I will guarantee you, if you start setting closer and follow this little bit of advice that I've learned over 30 years of doing this, you're going to catch more coyotes in the long run and avoid those misses. Now down the dirt hole, I use a variety of bait. I think that's been covered 1,000 times in the trapping industry. Bait down the dirt hole or lure. I'll take a little wad of grass, throw it down on top of that. I want that wad to be on top of my bait at all times. I want to be able to walk by here or whatever, maybe drive by if you're close to a road and look over there and know that that grass is on top of my bait. If you come back here and this is pulled out on top, laying there, you know your bait's probably stolen by a mouse or maybe a bird or whatever. Maybe you had it on a stick and it's gone right now. So always have it buried with something. And at the same time, if a coyote or a fox wants to get to that bait, they got to stand here and dig around here and try to get that out of there. Out comes the grass wad, and that's just more footprints on top of that trap. That's a lot of my way. When I set traps, I'm thinking all the time, I want that thing to be accommodated to step on top of the trap. He's going to be forced to step on top of that trap. I don't set traps thinking, well, there's several ways for him to come in. He's going to work that I might miss him. I don't leave a set thinking I'm going to miss that coyote. I make it so he has to step there. Now, something could happen like a little wind. Maybe your trap pan's exposed, whatever, by wind. There's going to be some things happen. You're not going to catch all of them all the time. I'm showing you ways right here to have a low maintenance system of catching coyotes and a percentage of the time. Now at times I'll use a bone, or in this case a lure holder. A lot of people call me and say, man, we really use a lot of these little, I call them little honeys because they actually have honey in the wrapping in the head. Something like that drove in at the base of this, or maybe down inside the hole. I use a lot more. This is just a dowel with burlap on it, has some honey and stuff in it, and that will work down a dirt hole too. But a lot of guys will drive these in the hole or at the base of a piece of grass here, a tuft of grass, and make a flat set out of it. And the principle applies the same way. The thing is, I want to block these sets off. Now if you are tempted to use the dry dirt around here and you have a trap set here, and maybe you're using wax dirt and you're lining the bed with wax dirt and you're setting it, the worst thing you can do is try to reach over here and get a top dressing of dirt. I see a lot of people want to do that, and they use the natural surrounding around there. Wax dirt's great, and I use lots of it. But at the same time, it still has to be able to come up through that crust. So you really can't put too much of that covering on top of that. But at the same time, by using the dry dirt underneath that's natural there and using the wax on top and try to blend in the outside a little bit. Maybe you can take some wax dirt and kind of mix it around here. You shouldn't have too many coyote refusals that way. This is just a classic coyote location. And there's also a chance of catching just about everything else here too. It's a major drainage coming out of some real rough country with not much access to it. There's several trails. There's different, varied terrain. There's different kind of vegetation. I think there's a half a dozen trails coming in and out of this place. There's some cows behind us at some lick tubs and stuff, so we didn't set anything up there in the open. We come down here and I got stuff set on these trails coming and going. I pulled up into a vantage point and I check my binoculars or walk over the edge and look at them rather than have to walk to each set and make more tracks and spend more time. But this kind of place, I snare in the wintertime also, but with cows still in these pastures, I can't. So I'm coming here early to get caught what I could with steel traps with footholds. Okay, this trail comes up out of the bottom of the creek. Of course, I'm standing on the high bank, and at the intersection here is where I wanted to have a set. We just took a coyote out of a trap, less than a quarter mile away. Now the coyotes, they weren't running down this creek, they were kind of cutting across here. And we're not real far off the county road, and I put in a couple sets here trying to intercept them one more time because I have access to these coyotes. Rather than trying to catch them in one spot, I'm trying to make a little better effort of picking up those 2 or 3 that are leaving tracks here. I try to check these from a distance, but today I came down just a little bit closer, and I'm glad I did. Right down here, just 3 or 4 feet away from the trap, is a coyote kick. People say that usually those are male coyotes, but I've watched lots of female coyotes do the same thing, stand there and kick. He knows this trap is here. We had a female in a trap just a quarter mile away at the most. I'm sure this is probably the dog, probably, the male coyote. And what I'm going to do is to change things up a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of bobcat urine and I'm going to sprinkle it on this bone, this backing right here, just to change things around a little bit. And then I'm going to add in my own scratches too. So what I'm going to do is just use just a little bit. There's other lure here already, and smell on this T-bone. And this is nice and absorbent. And this is different urine. This is bobcat urine. And I kind of save a lot of it sometimes just for places just like this where I want just a little different smell. Go with that. I'm going to take the hammer. I'm going to make my own little kick around here. Kind of freshen it up, make it look like a cat. Maybe leave a few droppings here. Just kind of make it look like a bobcat had been here. And this might make this coyote interested enough or mad enough to work this set again. We'll see what happens. I don't see any tracks here, but it has been windy the last couple days, and I haven't been coming down here and checking real close. So we'll see what happens here, and I'm pretty confident if I just give this a little time and leave it like this and make it look like a cat toilet, I'm pretty confident this coyote will come back and work this and get caught. Okay, these traps are just off the county road, probably 75 yards. I park in the same place, but the day I set these, I found a real definite landmark so I could walk straight to the set, stand in the same place, and check them. I use that dead tree down there for a reference. That way I don't have to pad around. There's no real, as far as where the sets are at, when you get down there you can tell where they're at. But from back here I can't see where those trails come up. So I picked up that dead tree and know exactly where to park, walk over, check them, takes a few seconds, turn around, come right back. I'm not padding around, leaving lots of extra footprints around. This road, this little 2-track trail, goes right through a little kind of unique saddle on this ranch. We're not real far from a fence line. My son's down here picking up T-bones and stuff to use at future sets. But there's also a cow trail or two that come up right through. They kind of cross right here on top of this saddle. It was just too good to pass up. The first check, I had a real big dog coyote here, and I remade the set. He hadn't really tore it up too bad, and this is 2 checks ago now. I picked him up, and then I come back to the end. Here's a real big, looks like a big old dog red fox. And this just shows you how animals will respond to circles, and when your remakes are made right, and try to make it natural like a coyote or a fox or whatever is just there. This just shows you what you just keep catching in some of these places. Coyote smell does not scare red fox away. It just doesn't. I've had people come for instructions. I've sold videos all over the country to people from Pennsylvania or Maryland, whatever, that use coyote gland lure, especially fresh coyote gland lure for fox, and do real well. And to be honest with you, I've never caught a fox on this ranch yet. So this is kind of a unique deal. It looks like a real big dog, real big red, for this part of the world, pretty heavy fox. So we'll definitely dispatch him and remake the set into a dirt hole, and this spot will maybe keep producing here again. I'm going to clean this dirt hole out here again and utilize it one more time. It's right on the edge of a trail, which I don't do all the time. This was such a good dry spot with a real good backing here when I set it. I thought I better utilize it and take advantage of it. Once again, I'll use the dry dirt right here at the set. A lot of fox smell. That fox is probably a juvenile. And I took it out of the trap. I noticed it didn't weigh that much. The canines aren't that big. Still kind of sharp. So there might be maybe a litter of fox raised around here. I'm not sure. I have not seen a fox track on this ranch. But with all this fox smell, we'll still pick up a few more animals here. And I got another set right behind the pickup. We're 50 feet from another good coyote set. So I'm not going to worry about having this set like this. This remake, this big circle made into another dirt hole. We'll see what we pick up here. Fox aren't circle shy at all, hardly ever. I've caught several thousand fox in my life, and probably half of them in circles. Once you get a good circle started, it's kind of hard to keep the fox out of them with all this fox smell. But we'll just see what happens here. And if nothing else, there'll be lots of attractiveness here to a coyote, and you might avoid this because of this circle and then respond to the set down over the hill here. I am going to kind of change things up a little bit and put just a little bit of fresh coyote gland on the outside blocking, and maybe that'll just be the extra little bit to put the coyote over the edge to jump in this trap. So he comes up here and has all this coyotes, or this fox smell, and this fresh coyote gland on the outside blocking here. It might be enough. Real nice, almost 1st of December red fox. They don't get any better than that in the West that I've ever seen. He's not really a pale, he's just kind of a, for here it's a real dark one actually. Paler than the eastern ones. When we pulled up here, I've been eyeballing these white bones down here over 50 yards away. And I use lots and lots of these T-bones, which you'll see here throughout the video. And I sent my son down to pick up what he had. I've never seen a T-bone this big. I'm trying to visualize what this was. It must have been a monster big Hereford bull or something. But I'll take my hammer and break it off right here so it dries in the ground. And I'll also use this big bulb on the end down in the dirt hole too. You'll see that throughout the video. These white absorbent bones, I just can't say enough good about them. I use them so much, so whenever we see a spot to pick up 8 or 10 of them or a dozen of them, we do. There's usually 6 or 8 good ones per carcass, but he found several here. Normally some of them get kind of short, the steak part, but we'll use these up this week. I'll use 2 or 3 or 4 of these a day, and as I'm getting more lines out, I just can't get enough good bones. We gathered up probably a half a 50-gallon drum early, but we just keep picking them up as the season progresses. Okay, there was some coyote activity on top of this old dam. There's a road right across the top of it. It's fairly wide. It gets narrowed down in a few places, but I wanted to be able to check it from the pickup if I could, which is behind us about 50 yards. So when I do check these places, and I have to come over and inspect a little closer, I try to stay on top of the clumps of grass. I don't like lots of footprints around my sets. Some people don't agree with that, but I've dealt with coyotes for the last 30 years, and I can guarantee in the long run you're better off leaving the less amount of footprints and sign around your coyote sets. This one I had to come over to re-lure it today, so I kind of circled around, got over here. I'm going to put some urine right here on this bone or on the outside blocking here, depends what I decide what I do here. I see a few rabbit tracks around, which isn't going to hurt anything. That trap has pretty good pan tension, probably 4 pounds, and the rabbits are working it pretty heavily and they're not getting caught. It's really windswept right here, but there's still plenty of dirt over the trap. So all I'm going to have to do to kind of freshen this up is just get my urine bottle out and just sprinkle a little bit on something to absorb it right here. Okay, the game trail where everything seems to be traveling is more or less out here about 4 foot away. But we do have a lot of antelope traffic through here right now. They're migrating through this area. And you can see the trails up and down here in the mud. So I set off the trail again, just a little ways. course the coyotes are going to smell it too. And you got kind of a natural funnel along here. There's some trails coming up from the bottom. I'm just going to refreshen this up a little bit. I got a little coyote ear. I'm just going to put on this grass right here, kind of absorb it. And I'm also going to put just a little bit of lure on that T-bone. And I'm checking this from a distance. I don't want to have to come over here any more than I have been. About once every 3 or 4 checks I walk over and re-lure it. And just kind of freshen things up. There's another set behind us here, 20, 30 feet. And I'm not going to touch that one. I'm going to leave it alone. There's a dam behind me. It's real flat on top. There's a lot of trails coming up from below. And I had a trap here last year that caught a badger. And when I come and set these traps, I noticed there was a little coyote activity around this old badger circle here. My dirt hole's still here, so I set a trap. And I come up here to check it today, and I notice my trap is moved out of the trap bed. And I see some antelope tracks around here, and they must have stood right alongside the trap and pushed it up out of here. And sure enough, I find a real fresh coyote track right here. This coyote wants to work this set, but just with that corner of trap showing right there was enough for him to stand back. The closest track is about 2 foot away. This shows the importance of coming over and checking these traps rather than checking from a distance all the time. With this antelope activity around here in the fresh dirt, this trap was pushed out, and here's a fresh coyote track. I remade the set, I reburied the trap, leveled it all off again nice. I don't remember exactly which bait I had on the bone down the hole, but I put some Cat Creek, some bobcat meat based bait down the hole. I think the lure was something else. I could see something dark on the bone. So I changed it around a little bit, give them a different smell. Found a different cow chip for an outside blocking. Whatever I had here was gone, probably blew away or got packed off by something. And just to change things up away from the coyote smells that I've probably been using here, I'm sure I'm going to a little back to a little bit of bobcat urine here. Just a little bit different smell from when this coyote decides to come back. I'm going to smooth everything off good, rough it up a little bit, and if I don't pick up the coyote that left the track, maybe I'll pick up a different one. Just a real nice natural bank right here. It's sharp. They're not going to come from the back. Got an outside blocking. Going to create that walk-through effect right here. The trap's buried right here. There's the center of the pan. Okay, there's a real definite trail that comes out of these breaks behind me down this pine ridge here. Some cedar trees on it. Good habitat, a lot of rabbit activity. And this draw comes up from below, pretty, not real steep, but fairly steep. And comes to a real pinch point right here. It's probably 4 or 5 foot wide. And the trail goes right along the head of this draw. I love these kind of locations where everything kind of funnels together. And I just put a simple dirt hole in here on the upwind side right off the edge of the trail. I put it off a couple foot off the trail to keep the deer out of it. And first check, come back, got a real nice mountain type coyote here. This set isn't tore up enough to justify make it into a pulling the trap and not utilizing this nice catch circle. There's going to be a lot of smell here, and the sod, where I dug it right into the sod like that, it didn't collapse the dirt hole, so I'm just going to remake this set. Okay, I'm going to utilize this existing hole, but this is real sandy here, pretty soft, and with the coyote caught here, he kind of cupped this out in front of the hole. So I'm going to build it back up. I don't like to have it like in a walk, step down effect or anything like that. I like my sets flush across. So I'm going to build this up out in front for quite a ways, so it isn't like just a small platform and you're trying to force them up. I'm actually going to make kind of a big platform and use some of this rougher stuff as the outside blocking and get this whole area built up. Otherwise, if I just used it the way it was and it was narrowed down here and cupped out, that's just a moisture collector for me. I don't like that kind of set. So I like it to be nice and flat out in front, very accommodating for the coyote and the next coyote to come along and step here. Okay, I'm going to rebait this with a little bit of cat meat bait, bobcat meat based. And this is the grass that was tore up at the set. That coyote, you know, in the circle here has this, and it's definitely got some smell to it and some, probably some saliva on it and stuff, and just more attractive to the next coyote that comes along. I'm going to put this right in the hole on top for a pan plug or a dirt hole plug here. The bait is below it. It's already got plenty of smell. Just for a little extra, I put a little bit of bobcat urine on the outside blocking here. Maybe turn it just like that. This looks pretty natural like this. You get a little bit of wind on this today, and we'll get our tracks kind of smoothed out of here. And the next coyote that comes down this trail is going to smell all this. He's going to smell the other coyote. And this is one case where I can make a remake here and probably pick up another coyote, maybe 2 or 3. Maybe a litter mate or whatever was running with this coyote will show back up. Smell this coyote at it, smell the bait. Oh geez, a bobcat's been there too. Just a little more intrigue, a little more attractiveness. And I expect, you know, we're only 15, 20 yards from the pickup. I expect to catch 2 or 3 more here yet this winter. Okay, this is just real good western broken habitat. Just real nice rough stuff. Has a varied terrain, ranch land, pasture land. This is coyote country. This is the kind of country I've made my living in for almost 30 years. This is the stuff that I spend a lot of time in. I do a lot of my coyote hunting in and coyote calling. But this is the type of stuff I just grew up wanting to spend the rest of my life in. One of the earliest books I read as a kid was one of old Gerald Whalen's book, and he talked about the rough, broken coyote country. And this is exactly the kind of country I was envisioning when I was reading it as a kid. So I've been fortunate to live in coyote country most of my life, all my adult life for sure. And that's just not by chance. That was by my choice. I moved to some great coyote country, some county programs like I'm involved in right now, predator control programs. And this is where I spend a lot of my time. When my friends, you know, ask me why do I work so much, well, this is what I get to work in every day. Okay, this is a number 3 modified Montana, and it's got 3 toes in the trap. It's an offset trap, and this was a flat set, and we're going to reset it here. Even though she's tore up quite a bit, we're going to try to make a remake out of this. It's between these 2 trails. Any coyote coming up here, and probably the litter mate or the other coyote that was with it, I see some other tracks here, he'll come back and get caught. We got a real classic location set up here. It's a fence corner and several trails crossing here, and of course the road we're parked on all crosses, and I got a trap on the northwest corner here. I didn't see much for sign at this location. It's pretty grassed over, and the trail was just rock hard when I started driving in here. But just with these many features coming together, I had to plunk a trap down there, and it paid off. This was the 3rd or 4th check here. And it's tore up, the backing's gone. So I got my stake puller. I'm gonna pull this trap, and we'll move it over about, 5 or 10 feet off to the side after we get done dispatching this coyote. So, looks like a big old dog. We'll check it out here. I'm using rebar stakes here. I took one of them double-headed wrecking bars, they call it. And a friend of mine make like a big cam here. So every time you do it, it actually picks up about 8 inches rather than the standard 2 or 3. You really get a lot of force. I had this special made. It's like a big shoe on there of band iron. And then we put a reinforcement across it so it doesn't bend the handle. But works wonder for pulling rebar stakes. I pulled the stake. I'm not going to remake it. There's just no way to make that circle into a set that they're not going to be able to get to the lure or the bait or the whatever we use there, except, you know, from the front. They're going to want to come from the back. So we're going to move off a little bit on the upwind side and use this grass right here just off that coyote's front feet as a good backing. And I'm going to change it around just a little bit. I'm probably just going to put in a real blended in flat set right off the road there, and just probably put some urine or maybe use a couple of his or her droppings and some gland lure and kind of make it a blended in set just outside the circle. You can see the circle here. This is the outside. I'm going to try to get that trap set right in here and blend it in and utilize this heavy grass, kind of rougher, coarser grass as an outside too. So when I get done, the trap's going to be blended in right here. And you'll see it a lot of times, especially a little snow, where other coyotes come up, maybe circle this and just be a little bit shy of that line right there, but they'll walk just outside of it. And we're going to have the best of both worlds. We're going to have an outside blocking out here, and then that natural line of a circle. And I think we'll pick up another coyote here eventually. Okay, here again, I'm just going to take off any loose hair, anything off of that trap. Snap it off once. Get any hard crusted stuff off of it. And then I dug my trap bed real carefully and put the stake out here right where the free jaw is going to sit. And try not to disturb anything any more than I had to. And when I get done, this set is going to be perfectly level and flush with the ground. I had to modify the trap bed just a little bit. It wasn't sitting completely flat. Adjust the pan just a little bit so it's level. There, and everything's pretty solid right there. I'm going to make sure this is nice and flush across here. And like I mentioned before, I didn't use too big a trap bed. I dug it exactly the size I needed it. That's real critical in my opinion. In a set like this, you want the ground to be pretty packed down around it. I'm going to blend in the best I can. Right here is the outside of the circle. We're only probably less than a foot away, but this will look better in a day or two. You get a little wind on this and move this stuff around a little bit. The dirt will blend in. But I got this rough stuff on the outside where the coyotes aren't going to be able to walk as easily. And then a lot of them will just skirt along the outside here. And I'll put just a little bit of glandler on this. I left this little tuft here with that really absorbent dead sagebrush root or whatever it is here, kind of a little stick. And I'll probably put just a little squirt of probably bobcat here and just a little change right here. And this is not really a blind set. I'll call it a blended in set. Let's call it that. And this kind of stuff does pick up some coyotes. Okay, this is a female coyote, obviously an old one. And usually when you come into a new area like this, almost always you pick up the old adult male first. You know, I'd say 90% of the time, or maybe even more. And I'm kind of surprised to see the first one picked up here, an old female like that. But you know, things can happen like that. But I'm gonna right now I'm gonna predict that next time we'll have another old coyote right here. We got this big cottonwood creek. Lots of cover on it, but there's usually a few cows on it, so I set the traps up above on trails coming up out of the creek. The coyotes don't always go up through the brush. They come up these cattle trails. I have a couple sets right along here. It looks like we got a real nice coyote. We'll go down and take a look at it. Got a little helper here. They were up here whitetail hunting and saw the coyote caught in the trap. So they came down to help me get it out of here. I'm going to show you the basics of the flat set. And I guess the flat set was best described to me, 35 years ago by a friend of mine in UP of Michigan who was a heck of a bounty trapper. I asked him one day, I said, what's the difference in a flat set and a dirt hole? And he said, well, basically a flat set is a dirt hole without the hole. And I've never forgot that, and I think my percentage of flat sets almost as big as my percentage of dirt holes anymore, probably in some cases more. And you basically have to have the same backing effect. A tuft of grass, a sagebrush, maybe a wheat stalks, something to keep that coyote from coming from the back. Now, I like to have the backing facing the wind, so my trap is on the downwind side. And I like to set them, you know, it can be 5 foot off the trail, 15, that's going to vary. We'll show you different locations in the video of that, where the traps are actually at. But as far as the actual flat set, what I'm trying to do here is show you the placement of the trap in relationship to the attractor. Now you can take a 1/2 inch rebar and ream a hole around like that down in the dirt and put some lure or bait down that hole and call it good, and you'll catch coyotes. There's no doubt. A lot of guys want to put lure and then put wool on top of it. I don't ever do that anymore. I had too many problems with that lure or that wool being gone or drug out on top of your trap. I don't like any kind of eye appeal like that other than white bones, which you've seen throughout the video at locations, a white T-bone. I use lots of them. And I can drive that right into the tuft of grass. Now these here, little honeys, these dowels, the head of this is a copy of an M44, a sodium cyanide gun, just called Coyote Getters or whatever, but now the modern version the last 30 or 40 years have been M44s, which are spring loaded. And this is just a copy to simulate the head of that, which is the right size to put a lure on to make a coyote, a canine, want to lick and grab and pull that out of the ground. And we make these to simulate that because it's been tested as being the right size, and they're so handy to use. You just drive that in the ground. I kind of tend to maybe put the dirt in a little tight around it so they can't pull it out. And the same principle applies as the dirt hole. I'm pretty tight to it. I'm about 4 inches, probably 4.5 or 5, probably about 4.5 inches from the attractor to the center of my pan. But by using this screen, and I'm tight to it. Of course, this is going to be buried. I'm just doing this so you can see. I think the worst part of showing somebody something is bury the trap and then pointing to it. This way I'm showing you exactly where the pan is. It's right directly in front. It can be moved to the side. You know, the dog can be. But that's about the right distance for me. And then again, I'm using an outside blocking. Now in this case, I'm going to have to blend in the whole entire set when I get done. But this is going to show the distance away from the attractor, which the lure is going to go on here. This outside blocking is going to be laid right here, and it can be just slightly farther away from the pan than in the pan from the attractor. So I like to even it up a lot of times. I'll put it so it's fairly tight, so you create this place right here to walk through. Don't go crazy and use something huge here or something. Don't bring a rock in from somewhere that in a field that doesn't have any rocks. Use something there. Maybe you can take your hammer and dig out a place like this, and then take this tuft of grass and plant it right here. Just takes seconds. And pretty soon, when this is blended in, and this natural, or this dirt's gone here, and you blend it in with the dirt either you bring in or some dry dirt right here, and it's all blended in, then you got this natural piece of grass here. Throw this dirt away, and you got yourself a walkthrough set. You can't get any simpler than that. Look around this area. It's all them clumps of grass around here. You're blending it right in. We got those little tufts of grass everywhere. Now, one thing you can do to really maximize your efficiency, and I hardly ever set a trap without doing this also, is I use 2 attractors. I use less lure and bait than most people, and I sell this stuff, but at a set, I use less. A lot of guys want to glob on, geez, a whole bunch on this. I'll put 4 or 5 drops of lure on here, or a small smear of paste bait of some sort on that. But on the outside blocking, I want urine or gland lure. One of my probably prefer it. Not going to make any bones about it. Well, this guy is just fresh coyote gland lure. I call it Deception. Several people called me after I made the first canine video and said, hey, we appreciate you not wanting to make it a commercial, but we want to know exactly what you're using. You know, you're pretty successful. We want to see what you're using. I like the nice, fresh, natural coyote gland. Put it on the inside of that blocking like that, towards the trap. Put a little paste bait or urine, or not urine, but lure of some sort, food lure on there that they want to grab, and you got yourself a deadly coyote set. I can't say too much about using the smell of coyote at a set. I use this stuff year round. I don't use it on M44s, of course, but I use it on trap sets, and I just don't see where coyotes shy away or ever get too used to it. Every batch is a little bit different. We make it fresh, use it throughout the year. It'll stay for a couple of years. I mean, you can use it for years. You don't have to use the whole ball at once. But for coyote trapping, if I had to pick one attractor, it'd either be probably fresh coyote gland or maybe a coyote bobcat meat paste bait. And the same with the dirt hole. I put paste bait down a hole, or maybe a skunky call lure down a hole or something like that. But on that outside blocking, I still like to use either urine. And as far as urines go, I use a variety. Let's see what I got in my bag today. Bobcat. And I'm not even trapping bobcats, I'm trapping coyotes. And I think a little variety of smell at a set is good. 2 lures. If I have another set 30, 40 feet away, and every location is going to be different. I can't say there's any hard, fast rule. I might have 5 traps at big locations that take a lot to cover, or maybe I've seen where several coyotes have gone through and hoping to catch multiples. But I can't overemphasize using a little bit of variety. Cat lures, not the minty kind, but the skunky kind, the kinds with lots of cat glands in them, work good for coyotes. I don't like the minty stuff or anything myself, but good natural lures, good quality urine, a little sprinkle of bobcat urine on this like this. You're just using just several drops that absorb into that absorbent material. I put about 15-20% glycerin in all my urines I sell and I use, and not only does it keep it from freezing, it makes it just a touch more resilient to the weather, and it'll actually impregnate into something like this or a tuft of wood or whatever, piece of wood, and last longer at a set. I got a lot of my customers telling me that. But I'll carry 1 paste bait, maybe 1 or 2 urines, a couple gland lures, and probably 1 call lure, and I'll set with that. When 1 bottle's empty, I'll look on my lure shelves, maybe grab a different kind. But I have my old standbys. I have one my son, it's called Badlands Bob. It's a bobcat gland bait, or lure, I'm sorry, and my son uses that a lot for coyotes and real successful with that. It's probably one of my higher selling, biggest selling lures now for canine and bobcat trappers. I laugh when I read people say, don't use bobcat gland because bobcat season's not open. Well, that is just crazy to me to think that way, because you're going to catch a lot of cats on coyote gland too. Okay, you can't say, oh, I'm not going to catch any cats, or I'm not going to catch any coyotes there because I'm using this. On the video, we have a red fox caught in a coyote remake. It doesn't make any difference. You'll get caught in a coyote remake. I can't overemphasize the different smells. Coyotes are born. I do a lot of coyote denning. I have for years. I was very fortunate to learn from great denners and work with great denners, and it's a way to stop coyote depredation and go into the areas and locate the dens and get the pups, hopefully get the old coyotes shot and or caught. And around coyote dens, you see it when you get close, you start smelling them sometimes. You see the pup wash, they call it, around the den. It'll be bigger and bigger as the season progresses, but as you walk up, you see a lot of little holes sometimes. And lots of times I walked up and I'm watching the den, I'll kick a tuft of grass, and there'll be a little bone underneath it, or a piece of coyote poop or whatever right there, a little pup, and a little bit of urine right here. And as the moms and dads come in, the parents come in to feed them pups, they're feeding them right there at the den, and they'll bring in a antelope leg or a lamb leg or whatever, and you'll find them scattered around and they dig on them. Well, a dirt hole is no different than that. They're programmed from day one to work them holes and that urine smell and that gland smell and that poop and stuff around there. And when they go out in the world on their own, they're investigating them places, because mom's been bringing them food since day one. Since they were in the den, she feeds them milk, and pretty soon bigger stuff, and they're out of the den, and she's bringing them in food. And as they get older, they start hunting with mom and dad out around, but they investigate that kind of stuff. That's why dirt holes and flat sets are so effective, especially by using different smells. And if you have bobcats in your area, and a coyote's used to coming up and eating the last of finding what a bobcat left, or vice versa, bobcat smells work good. I have some people that don't buy any other lure from me but bobcat gland and coyote gland for their coyote trapping. They use somebody else's lures, for the down the dirt hole, but they use my gland lure. I can't say enough about that kind of smell at a set. And then I'll turn around later in the season and use something maybe entirely different. maybe a skunky lure, maybe I'll use a mild lure, but I'll use something different at a set just to give them a little change up. If you see coyotes coming in and they're working the location but not getting caught, set another trap. A lot of people check them same empty traps thinking they're going to show back up, but if the coyotes are missing them or they're not going to work them, set a different trap with entirely different bait. Always hold one or two back for later in the season when you see that kind of stuff. And some of you are going to be fur trapping exclusively and you're not going to have that luxury of trapping longer, or you're going to be moving down the road. But it'd be nice to pick some of them up. Right on the video here we have a couple real old coyotes, toothless coyotes that we worked on all summer with an airplane or with snares, and we never caught them. We've called for them coyotes, we never got them. And the first and second check, we had a couple old coyotes caught in sets, probably with gland lure. So, or just basic sets, just good standard sets. So it is effective, but try to keep a few things in your bag of tricks and don't use all your lures and baits the first go around. Save some of that stuff. Checking a few traps this morning. This is our first spot, and we got a coyote caught here. I'm standing on a trail, actually kind of a two-track road that ends just up here behind me, and there was some coyote activity here, and I had a trap just off the road on the upwind side, and this is the second check here, and I got this pretty good sized coyote, kind of wet. It snowed last night right before dark, 3 or 4 inches in a high wind, so I came out here to run through some of this stuff. But after I dispatch it, I'm going to remake the set here with some dry dirt. And on the way in, we passed one coyote track not too far away from here. And I wondered why there was only one track. Well, now I know why. It was probably with this coyote, and this one's caught, but the other one will show back up. With this many tracks around and me driving right to it, we probably won't catch the other coyote in this set. But you never know. Occasionally you do. But usually when I get out and walk around in the snow and make too much disturbance, we just don't catch coyotes like that here very often until either bears off a little bit or more snow comes on top of it. But I'm going to remake this. You can't catch them in the back if the traps are in the back of the pickup. So we'll remake this, and maybe in a few days when it gets up to 40, 50 degrees again and melts off, maybe this will be, our sign will be gone enough to pick up another coyote here. It was just a simple set, just a dirt hole with some cat meat bait down the bottom of the hole and just off the road. So I got it off the road about 4 feet, 5 feet in case I caught a badger. It wouldn't make a big old crater right here in the middle of this 2-track. So it's not used very much, but it gets a little bit of traffic, especially by me in the wintertime. So I set it just off and let the wind do the work for me and catch the coyote. Picked up another coyote down here. It's actually a trail that was crossing the draw, not so much going up it, but I'll take him any way we can get him, to tell you the truth. This coyote was coming off the top last, and I'm sure this is the last track I've seen in here, and that's not long ago. And there's a trail that you can see goes up the side hill. Kind of hard to see in the brush, but he came down. I caught him right down the bottom, and it's one of them spots where there's times they'll come up or down the draw, and they get to a place like this, or kind of a crossroads, and they'll turn and go up the trail. So I kind of knew after seeing these tracks in here, I better set all the avenues, not just the main ones. I better set all the extras. Almost too thick for deer to get through, believe it or not. But these coyotes and cats travel up and down here. I'm only 25 yards from where we just picked up that last cat. So this handful of snares has produced 2 animals already this morning. And kind of had to wait them out, I gotta be honest. These things took a while to come back. But they did show back up, and he's dispatched there. Wrapped around the tree. Okay, on the way back out to the pickup, about a 100-yard walk, I decided to take a quick shot at that last location. I just produced a coyote and cat, just a handful of snares this morning. And it's a real thin, narrow strip, kind of like a ribbon, 20-30 yards wide, widens up towards the bottom. But just one of them places, I think hunting's going to follow this corridor of activity here, just a little bit of cover. I know it's a little windy, but I have to take these opportunities to take these shots. I'm on a real trap line, real snare line. I'm not fabricating anything, so If it's a bit windy and breezy, I can't help it. Anybody that's been to Wyoming before knows what kind of conditions we have here. About a 30-35 mile an hour breeze today, and in here checking some snares I just set, and already picked up one coyote here, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit here in just a minute. But an eagle flew off, a golden eagle flew off when I walked up here in this draw. This is what a golden eagle does to a snared coyote whenever they get a chance to, especially in the middle of winter. Just basically ruin it. This coyote looks like it just went down the draw, down the trail, and died right in the trail. There's nothing broken off. Just, you know, a good neck catch, it looks like. Looks like probably a male. We had that female about 100, maybe 150 yards away, and when I set these I knew there was a pair. It was real evident in snow, and I hung 11 snares in here, and I had her in the first snare I hung, and this was the last snare I hung. He was at the end of the line here, so we got this pair of coyotes right here out of the middle of the sheet. Just a quick close-up of them. Real typical how they die in those ambergs. 564, 7x7, laying dead in the trail. Can't get any better than that. Can use the spot over and over again with this. The looks of this. Okay, we picked up another nice, looks like a female right here in the middle of March. Kind of late for fur trap, and this is a deal on a calf complaint. Had 3 of them caught here so far. Two in a pair of snares I had set on a high bank, and then this older coyote here looks like caught down here in the sagebrush. And there's a road to the right, and that's been real muddy, a 2-track, and I know they won't run up and down that muddy road as much as actually water running down on the sunny days. So I came over here in this sagebrush, running parallel with the road, and there's a nice cedar hill over here to the left with some old bones and stuff. And I seen where a coyote or two had been around them bones, but it's kind of off their actual travel way. So I brought 2 or 3 bones down here and put them on a kind of a high spot. It really wasn't an anthill, but kind of like a gopher mound affair. And it kind of really stood out. But when I threw them big white bones out there, the eye appeal was even that much more. And I just put in a simple flat set with some gland lure on it, Deception coyote gland, fresh coyote gland, and picked up this coyote almost immediately. Right up there at the base of them trees is where that cow carcass, or maybe even 2 are. There's lots of scattered bones through there, and I just brought them down here about 30 yards or 25 yards. So these coyotes were kind of halfway used to seeing them white bones. These ones scattered around down here with gland lure and a little urine on it would be something different, and it worked. But I kind of call it casting for coyotes. A couple sets in these places where they meander through the brush. They don't have to be along a trail, and this one is on a real faint trail, but I kind of scattered a few through here, and there's my bag for my camera right there, and then back in the saddle is the pickup. That's only about 75 yards away, 80 yards maybe. Kind of a nice location. And like I say, in the winter time, the coyotes go through this saddle back over here. It's been so darn wet and muddy, and they're just not traveling. Their water actually runs down these places the last few days. The snow's gone today, but 2 days ago this was wet. So I came over here where I thought they'd be more prone to travel, even though I didn't see any tracks. And I came over here, and just from experience, I know that once you drive in these places and make some mud tracks, they're not going to run up and down that trail for a while after making muddy tracks with the pickup that I did. So I could come over here to the side where it's a little drier and could check from a distance, and it worked. Big old coyote. I caught several in here this winter, but these 3 showed back up, and it looks like we got them all. So good deal here. Tuna snare and 1 in a trap. Right around this rock is a real good trail. There's kind of a split rock trail, goes through it, and around the corner goes by some big pine trees. Here's the trail leading up to the snare. Just wanted to show it's kind of a shelf here below this rock. This is around the corner from that big white rock. And there's just kind of a level here. All the game and all the livestock are using this in the summertime going to water. And the trail continues on around through some pine trees up here. Well, as luck will have it, the snare is missing here. And I look down over the bank, and right here is another nice coyote down here stretched out. I'll zoom in a little bit. It's caught with about a 12-foot snare by 64 and anchored solidly up here on this limb, and another Wyoming coyote caught stretched out down here and hanging down here over the bank. There's the snare support. The trail went around the point of this juniper. A little bit of debris along the trail here made a perfect spot. I walked up here about 30 yards to find this place, not real far, and just waited it out. And right there to the right of this juniper, and where the debris is, the white debris on the right, is where the snare hung. That extra branch has been broke off, maybe by the coyote, maybe not. And just another spot, an example of finding these good locations is better than trying to fabricate one and catch these coyotes this way. Real thick branch made a nice point, directed them right in. The debris goes up against the rock. This stuff was all laying here. I just positioned it a little bit better, and it did probably make a coyote shy away for a while, to be honest with you. But here we are, probably 30-40 days later. This coyote decided to come back, and of course the juniper is a barrier on the right, and the trail goes right through here. That's the conclusion of it. I hope you learned something from it and can adapt some of the methods that I've shown you to your trap or snare line. If you noticed, I called it the Thinking Man's Guide to Coyote Trapping and Snaring, and it's for a reason, because not all areas are exactly the same, or all instances or even coyotes are exactly the same. So I hope you can use the information and make it work for you yet this fall or winter. This is 2014, and the season's shaping up to be a good market for coyotes again, especially heavy coyotes. And I think that if you apply some of the things I've showed you, it'll add on to your catch, no doubt. Thank you. Here's a T-bone flat set about 30 yards from that last catch. This will catch an animal here yet too. They see the eye peel there.